Hi there, welcome to the StoryTown Magazine Launch Week. My name is Jules Corriere and I'm the Outreach Program Director at the McKinney Center and also the Director of the StoryTown program here in Jonesboro. We have got an exciting week of events lined out for you that are going to be starting at 1 o'clock every day right here. And you'll be able to hear from storytellers, from story collectors, from actors, from writers, lots of the different people that are involved in making Storytown projects in Jonesboro a reality. Now you're going to be able to get your own copy of the StoryTown magazine at the McKinney Center in Jonesboro. That's at the corner of Main Street and Franklin Avenue. Tomorrow's special day, I'm going to be teaching a workshop at 1 o'clock, and there's still room left if you would like to register for it. If you'd like more information, go to the Storytown Facebook page and look for the workshop. You might be able to also find it on the McKinney Center Facebook page as well, and just register for that. That's going to be a Zoom event. You won't see it here on Facebook Live, but you could still register and be part of the story collecting workshop if you ever wanted to know what does it take to collect stories from my family, from my school, from my organization, or from my community. We're going to have an intro course to that, and you'll be able to learn a lot of the very first tools that you're going to need in order to do that. Now, we've got a great way to kick off this exciting launch week, and that is we're going to be speaking right now with the founder of the National Storytelling Festival and the President Emeritus of the International Storytelling Center, Jimmy Neal Smith, as well as our beloved town administrator, up until recently, Bob Browning, who was also instrumental in helping to make Jonesboro the place where the storytelling revival happened. So sit back, get ready for an exciting interview as we talk to these wonderful founders of the Storytelling Festival and really the storytelling movement. Welcome, Jimmy Neal and Bob. Thank you so much for being here today.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So I am sure that everybody wants to know just how did storytelling start here in Jonesboro? What was the idea that launched it? And here we are all of these decades later, and it's still going strong.
Well, I can begin that story by saying that, of course, we're all storytellers, and we all live our lives through a network of stories, so it was certainly a part of our tradition. But what was the key to the kickoff, so to speak, what spurred it on was a trip that I took with some students. I taught at Science Hill High School. I taught journalism, and with the with the students, I was going to print the school newspaper, and I was driving along. We were listening to the radio, and on the radio was a humorist, comedian, storyteller, Jerry Clower, and he was telling a story about hunting in Mississippi, and we were having a good time enjoying the story. And I don't know what caused me to think about this. Maybe it was something I was already thinking about, but I just hadn't verbalized it. And that is, why don't we have a storytelling festival in Jonesboro? And of course the idea just floated away. It was just momentarily responded to by the students. But it wouldn't let me go. It just kept tugging at me and tugging at me. And so finally, I presented the idea of a storytelling festival to the leaders in Jonesboro, in particular to the Civic Trust in Jonesboro, some of the town leaders. And they said, well, you know, that's a pretty good idea. Now you do it. So I did.
So what did that look like when they said you do it? what was it that you did
Okay.
that very
That
first
first
year?
time.
What did it look like?
Okay, there were two levels or two different approaches to the festival. One was a concert with Jerry Clower. And I didn't know if storytelling would be strong enough to attract people, so I said, maybe I need somebody else. So I got Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys, and the Avery County High School Cloggers were there. And that was the concert, Saturday night. We had 1,300 people. And I think Jerry Clower was the one that brought most of them there, oddly enough. But then the next afternoon, we rolled a wagon into Courthouse Square, and off that wagon we told stories.
What kind of wagon was it?
It was an old farm wagon. It was a hay wagon. And fortunately, I was able to, I knew Ortha Collins, and he farmed with horses, and mules. And he had all kinds of equipment, including this old wagon. So he brought it into town, and there it was. And it was in front of the mail pouch building.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember distinctly Ray Hicks, who was the old farmer from Western North Carolina, who was actually the inspiration in many ways for the whole festival over the years. And there he was, standing up. He was 6 feet 7 inches tall, and he was towering standing on that wagon. And he told the heifer hide, which is an old jacktail. And we had 60 people in the audience, if that many. And they were just kind of sitting around. We had some on straw bales and some in chairs. But we had people that actually came up and told a story. And an old farmer from Western North Carolina came up and told about, I can't remember now specifically, but it was an old story he'd heard growing up. And then the most interesting part, I think, was Connie Reagan and Barbara Freeman were librarians in Chattanooga. They had read about the festival in the Tennessee Conservationist. There was an article that was in there about it before it ever happened. And they said, we want to go to this. And so they came, and they got on the stage. And one told a children's story, another one told a children's story. That was what they were doing then. And it was a contribution to the enjoyment of the day. Of course, later on, Connie and Barbara formed the Folk Tellers, and they were well known throughout the country for telling stories.
So the very first storytelling festival around that hay wagon had about 60 people. And today, there are, used in a regular year, it didn't happen this year because of COVID, but there's usually tents all around town, and thousands of people come. Yeah. At what point, Bob, did the town begin to realize this festival is really starting to take off, and we ought to get involved in working and helping it? And then what did you do to help grow this storytelling festival?
Well, one thing is that I came in, started working with the town of Jonesboro in 1978, so I was sort of 5 years behind in being able to answer that question. But when I came in, the festival had already gone to tents. Mm-hmm. There were some things that went on in churches, and they sort of evolved from different kinds of locations in town that were, I think you were down in Sisters Row, maybe at some place. So
tell me a little bit about that evolution. So from one concert around a hay wagon, what was that evolution?
Well, one thing is that the festival caught on. It was unique. it was the storytellers were just high quality, unbelievable, and it caught on, and it developed an audience where they didn't have any choice but to look at larger venues and a larger way to house people. So when they went to tents, it sort of built from there, and it the effort of going in and trying to take the kind of crowds that were coming to the festival and divvy them up in all these different smaller, it obviously was a logistical nightmare to some extent in terms of trying to set it up. But I'm sure there was this closeness and ambiance that was in the lower area, the sisters row. I forgot what you called that thing.
Bird's Kitchen
and places like that. But so at the time I got in, there was some of that was going on, but they had realized that they needed to go to larger venues, and there were none. So the tents, were a way to accommodate the number of people that were coming. When I became town administrator, the town was already had been partnered in the thing to begin with. You can't carry on a festival in any town without having a partnership with the governing body. But at the same time, and the people of Jonesboro, that was the other thing that was going on, is that you had merchants and residents that volunteered to do this and volunteered to do that, and it was like you're having guests come in from someplace, and you wanted the town to be as nice looking as possible because we're having these guests come in. And Toby Bledsoe, who was mayor for 8 years anyway, and I can remember her, especially during the festival, she would tell me to come across, Bobby, come across. I want you to meet my very best new friend. Just and the people in Jonesboro were like that. It's like if they'd give you the shirt off their back, if you tried to take it, you were in serious trouble. But if they would give it to you. It's just the nature of the people in this area. It was just unbelievable. And it still is. It's a characteristic of Jonesboro in this area, of just the way that people interact, and so you have people who have come into town for 40 years in a row or something, that stay with people in town. We don't have enough accommodations in Jonesboro by far to handle the crowd that comes in. But people stay in people's houses. So
talk about that. What do you think it was about this festival that made the people who live in Jonesboro open their homes to strangers, because there weren't any hotels and we had thousands of people coming here? Talk about that. And you've had guests, right?
Sure. Yeah, we've had storytellers stay with us. We've had until this year, we've had a full house of people who stay with us, and it's kind of interesting because they were in Texas and in California, and they emailed to us. They had participated in the virtual festival, and they emailed us, are we going to the Pancake House? Are we going to go to Amigos now? And this kind of stuff, as if they were here. And I couldn't figure out if they were actually here or not, and I didn't know it. But I just thought that was kind of cute. But it's the nature of the people. That's one thing. You've heard stories of people who have had a neighbor move in, and they've taken food over, and their house hasn't been put up where they could sleep, and they invited them to stay at their house until they got set up and stuff like that. It just happens all the time. It's the nature of the people here. So I think that's one thing. And then storytelling itself brings in the kind of the people who are engaged in I guess communication and have they're an unusual, I think, somewhat of a unique crowd anyway, and it's the difference And a good example of that would be we've had a festival just a little bit longer than the Storytelling Festival that we call Jonesboro Days, and our crew will go out after a day of Jonesboro Days, and we're picking up trash in the street and we're doing all that, which is typical. In storytelling, our crew would go out, and if a trash can was full, then the trash would be stacked neatly around the trash can. You know, you still wouldn't see anything on the street. It was just, you know, we heard so many people say they felt like they were coming to Brigadoon, you know, and you don't mess it up, you know, that kind of thing. So that was one thing, is that the people who came were just wonderful, and they appreciated the town. And then storytelling itself lends itself to relationship building and community building. So you have people who enjoy storytelling and who get engaged in it. I think there's a natural affinity to appreciate people, and you know, and you develop these relationships with the local people because you're asking questions and you're hearing you're passing on. You're still storytelling. You know, you're passing on these stories. And I think that helps create this bond. We know that it creates bonds in people and relationships.
So you've got all of these people coming to town now. What did it do for the town itself, this festival weekend? What's the impact on the town?
Well, it's the biggest weekend economically. A lot of the merchants, especially in the early days, would make it through winter by what they made off the festival. Just that one weekend, it would sustain them, you know, until spring. Has always been the big economic generator as far as you know, the retail shops and restaurants and things like that. The amount of publicity the town has received from having the National Storytelling Festival and the International Storytelling Center in town. We are branded as you know, storytelling capital of the world, and I think we earned that brand. So you know, there's a lot of different ways it has sort of set the stage for who we are, and I think to some extent it has highlighted who we already were in this community. You know, the storytelling was always a big deal. You could hear Doc Bird and other people talking about Bird's Kitchen. You could hear Doc Bird, you know, telling stories. People told stories all the time, and Jimmy Neal told stories all the time, and would talk about his family and his grandmother, and sitting around the table and talking about and telling stories about, you know, what went on. And that had a big impact on me because you know, I began to realize just how important it is, and the importance of being able to pay attention to that as society changed, and it made it much more difficult for people to communicate with each other because there were so many distractions and so many other ways to communicate besides sitting down and talking to somebody on a human-to-human basis.
Now, as this, we'll call it a movement, started to grow, and the two of you began working together, what did you begin to envision then, and what steps did you take to really harness this energy of storytelling? Because a lot of communities around the country, especially communities in the South, storytelling happens naturally, as you just explained. But when did you recognize the power of storytelling, and what did you begin to envision and actually do to harness that energy?
Well, I want to answer that in a couple of different ways.
Great.
For me personally, it happened at that first festival. Not at the concert, that was Saturday night, but Sunday afternoon. And Ray Hicks, I mentioned earlier, was sitting on the courthouse steps on the opposite side of the courthouse from the wagon. And for some reason, I just went back there, and it was Ray Hicks sitting there telling stories to like 7 or 8 people. And I said, you know, there's something to this, because it was magical to see that happen. I've never forgotten that. And then, as we had the festival, like again and again and again, I just knew it was going to happen again. There wasn't any question about it. When we named it the National Storytelling Festival, we knew it was going to be the National Storytelling Festival.
Was it the National Storytelling Festival
was
the very first year?
The first festival in Jonesboro was the first storytelling festival in the world.
Wow.
It's strange, but yes, that's true. Now, storytelling took place in other festivals, but not an event that was exclusively storytelling. And our event was exclusively storytelling. We had a little music here and there, and a little craft display here and there, but eventually it morphed into a total focus on storytelling.
And then what became possible after that to the two of you? That wasn't possible before.
I guess from my standpoint, again, the festival was, within that first 5 years had developed a great deal of support and recognition. I can remember coming in and, Jimmy being on the front of the Tennessee Magazine with Alex Haley, as a one of the, I guess, artistic generators of, contributors, I guess, in the state, and it was constantly being written up, even after 5 years, in the New York Times, the Los Angeles paper, and places like that across the country. So it was getting all this, great publicity. And the other thing is that, a tribute to Jimmy is that it never really changed. It evolved, but the festival didn't really change in what it was trying to accomplish. It didn't get distracted by having a whole bunch of, regardless of what he did the first time or whatever, it focused on storytelling. It focused on the purpose of the festival, and never variated from that. It was you didn't have a bunch of other things that were going on that might, some kind of, blown up children's play area or something like that. It was always, if the kids came, it was, you got in the tents, this is a storytelling festival and this is what it's going to be, and it's been that way, the whole time. And I think that's a tribute to paying attention, not only to what made it successful, but also to the importance of the event and the importance of storytelling. Period. I don't think he ever deviated from that.
I think it was an issue of branding, because and we didn't know that we were branding it. We just did it.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that we wanted to do storytelling, and we knew that the best way to do that was to build this event around storytelling. And we had, at the first festival, the second festival, we had, some craft displays and some dancing and some music and so forth. But soon all of that just fell away. It just fell away. It wasn't necessary. And we realized that we focused on storytelling, and that became our brand. And
Now,
people realized that.
where did you go those first few years to find storytellers? Because you used the country's and the world's best storytellers, but there wasn't really a field of professional storytellers back then. So how did you know where to find these folks, and how did they know how to find you?
Well, over the years, early years, we had to hunt for storytellers, just like I had to hunt for Ray Hicks. I said, we need a storyteller from the mountains. So I called up a friend of mine who was actually a teacher of mine, Tom Burton. And I said, you and Ambrose Manning have been collecting stories, and especially ballads around the country, around the countryside in western North Carolina, East Tennessee, and so forth. I said, have you run into any storytellers? And he immediately said, Ray Hicks. That's who you need to get, Ray Hicks. And so that's how we got him. And I had to call his neighbor. He didn't even have a telephone. I had to call his neighbor, and who was a well-known North Carolina craftsman, by the way. And I said, I want to talk to Ray Hicks. How do I do that? He says, you call here at 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, and I'll have him here. And that's what I did. And I talked to Ray. And over time, I can remember Doc McConnell and I. See, I saw Doc McConnell at an old-time medicine show at Jonesboro days. And I said, Doc, how would you like to come to the Storytelling Festival? The irony of it is, he was in the first audience. He wasn't telling stories, but he was in the first audience. So he came to the second festival. Catherine Wyndham was an author, and she collected ghost stories, real ghost stories. And I called her up one day, and I said, would you come to Jonesboro and tell some of your ghost stories? She says, you must want my daughter. She's the actress. And I said, no, I want you. You're the teller of the stories. Well, she came and told ghost stories the second year of the festival. And then Doc and I would meet in my office at the Parsons table after one festival and planning for another festival. And we said, well, where are we going to get our storytellers? Well, we made contacts with the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian. And both of those entities would recommend to us two things. One is the storyteller, and two, the folklorist that was working with that storyteller. So we began to have traditional storytellers immediately. Now, many of them have died off. They're not like they used to be, and it's harder to find a traditional storyteller now. And traditional meaning they learn the stories sitting on their grandparents' knee, you know, and that's rare anymore. But eventually we just started pulling them in. It's kind of like fishing. You just pull them in.
Jimmy and I have always felt like we've had divine assistance in Jonesboro, and I think this is an example when you think about, you know, this idea and where it started, and then you end up very early in the history, I guess, of the festival, and you have people like Jackie Torrance and Doc McConnell and Catherine Wyndham. I get sentimental about a lot of things. But, you know, they were just icons in storytelling for decades, and just absolutely wonderful storytellers. So when you have people like that, it almost didn't evolve into that. You just had some wonderful storytellers from the very beginning. And when I came into town, I mean, it was impactful. It was already impactful. It didn't need to evolve much more in terms of the quality of the performances. It was outstanding, and has always been sort of listed as one of the top 100 festivals in the country. And the other thing is, when Jimmy got additional staff, you know, the quality of what they did was outstanding. It was well thought out, well planned. That's the other thing. And working with the town of Jonesboro closely, his staff has always worked very closely with the town and worked out issues related to parking and buses coming in from schools, you know, all over the region, and, you know, and across Tennessee and stuff like that on Friday and stuff. And we've always worked together to maintain a high quality and pay attention to the people who are coming in. so that they know that they are appreciated and that it's important to us that they're in town. So I think that kind of attitude coming from town staff, I've when I was administrator, my staff heard all the time, you're in a special place with special people, and if you don't think you are, I recommended a city up there in Sullivan County that they could go to.
I've been to some of those meetings where you've said those very words. So when 10,000 people started coming to this town, how many, for those who don't know how big or how small Jonesboro is, how big was Jonesboro at that time when you started to see those record attendance?
Well, there was, there were times when the festival was a real challenge for us in terms of handling the number of people in town, the parking, even as well organized as it was. I think there was a year or two that I think you drew maybe 14,000 people or something like that.
Well, we know we had 12,000 one year, and that was very difficult to manage.
Yeah.
Because how big is Jonesboro? Or how big was it at the time?
Well,
about 4,000 people?
At early on, when I started working for the town of Jonesboro, the population was 1,166 people.
So how does a town of 1,166 people support 12,000 people coming into town?
You have a lot of volunteers.
And you work real hard.
And you paid staff overtime, and you did what was necessary. Just the volunteers, that was the hallmark of what needed to happen in order. And again, so many people took participants in their homes and overnight and things like that. There was just a lot of that, and as the festival grew, we sort of realized and suggested to Jimmy that he priced the festival so that we sort of maintain 10,000 people. We felt like we could do a good job of handling 10,000 people. But when you got beyond that, it started becoming a lot more difficult. And it wasn't just difficult in Jonesboro, but they had trouble. There were people who were staying, in 30 or 40 miles away and having to drive in, during the day when you had that many people in town. Everything in Johnson City, of course, they've expanded overnight stay accommodations in Johnson City substantially, but in the early days, it filled up everything in Johnson City and Kingsport, Bristol, Greenville. And then Irwin started their Apple Festival, and I'm sure there were people who came in for that and just filled up that many more rooms.
So as the festival grew and as you started to see the capacity of your community grow in order to accommodate this, what other things did you begin to envision besides just a festival once a year?
Well, one of the first things that emerged in that experience was to create an organization that could manage all of this and promote it. And so we created the National Association for the Preservation and Perpetuation of Storytelling. So it was NAPS, N-A-P-P-S. And that brought people to us in that organization. They became members. And one thing I want to say about how the growth occurred, both with the festival and the organization, was that the storytellers were out there promoting Jonesboro and promoting the festival. And an example, a big example, a major example, was Connie Reagan Blake and Barbara Freeman, who were the folk tellers. And they were traveling around the eastern part of the country and eventually across the world. And wherever they went, they would promote Jonesboro, the National Storytelling Festival, and storytelling. And that, along with the news media, grew the festival. I mean, it was a wonderful event, but it had to have those multipliers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what made the difference. And I can remember the 1975 festival. That was the third festival. We had at least 3 major news media there. CBS Morning News, Newsweek, and I can't remember the third one, but there were 3 major news media that were there. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. From there on, we would have, as Bob just mentioned, New York Times and Los Angeles Times and all the other times around the world. It became quite an attraction for people. And the media, I think they thought it was really unique, really important, and something they wanted to let their readers or viewers know about.
When did you know that you were going to need something called the International Storytelling Center? When did you know that needed to begin to happen here?
Well, I think that emerged over time. We actually started out over the Main Street Cafe in an office, and that's what we called our National Storytelling Resource Center. And I had a staff there of 5 or 6, I guess, funded by the federal government of all things. And they did video and they did audio, collected stories, archived them, and we had a nice little archive starting out. Every event that's taken place, every festival that's taken place, has been recorded as an audio event. Some video, but mainly audio. Every one of them. So we can go back to that first festival and hear the storytellers that were telling stories then. I don't know what caused me to think about that, but we did.
I'm glad you did, because those are national treasures now, because they weren't really doing this all over the world at that point. There weren't professional storytellers in the world prior to this festival. And so that also speaks to the question of, when did the International Storytelling the Storytelling Center become an idea, and how long did it take to make it happen?
I want to interrupt just a little bit on
Go
this,
right ahead.
because I think part of the answer to that question was earlier than the center itself, but because once people like Jackie Torrance and Donald Davis and people like that started telling stories professionally full time, it became apparent. One of the things that happened when he formed NAPS was that there was a need for connectivity between these storytellers and agents, and you know, if I'm going to do this professionally, how do I do it? You know, do I need an agent? Who is paying attention to this? How do I get insurance and this kind of thing? So there was a service aspect to NAPS that was in addition to doing the kinds of things that were necessary with the festival. And also, Jimmy at that time was paying attention to the fact that to the power of storytelling and the impact that story had. You can sit in one of those tents and it takes you, 30 seconds to understand how impactful it is with one person in a tent with 1,500, 2,000 people, and they're up there making people cry and laugh. And there are times that if you could, if it was possible to hear a pin drop, on the stage or whatever, that it's just be quiet and then uproarious laughter. It's amazing that one person could stand up there and have that kind of command. So when you start looking at, okay, the power of storytelling is, how does it impact? How can it impact your community? And can story be used as a means of bringing people together, of developing relationships? And I heard him say more than one occasion, it's hard to hate somebody when you know their story. And so it's that part of it came along, as part of NAPS and sort of evolved in the process. So that was prior to the Storytelling Center. That was just part of the movement itself. And then it sort of got to a point where the other part that I will say in Jimmy's behalf was that he started the festival with the idea that Jonesboro needed something important, something to happen that brings people to town. And the town was changing dramatically at that time because, it had been, just homegrown stores and stuff like that. But then the big box retailers had come into Johnson City. The adjacent town was the commercial center. The town was losing businesses. There were a lot of vacant stores and this kind of thing. And so part of it had to do with, okay, what can we do that generates people coming into town and doing something that supports the retail community in town. And so that was a big factor for him. And then as the festival grew, it became, even a more important factor because, hey, we've done something here that really has had an impact. It's helping people's livelihoods and this kind of thing, and bringing a lot of attention to the town. And if you think about it, from the time that I came in '78 with, a little over 1,600 people in town, we've grown. The town of Jonesboro has changed dramatically, grown dramatically since that time period. And when you have people come in town and they're thinking you're Brigadoon and all that, we've had a tremendous number of people who have moved into our community from other places because just because of the type of people that we have here, and the relationship, the understanding within the community of the importance of relationships. And so one of the questions that Jimmy got from me, as we worked together, is, okay, how do you make this, how do you make the impact on Jonesboro more permanent? Mm-hmm. Because, we're a small town in, northeast Tennessee. What happens if NAPS or the NSA, whatever, or the International Storytelling Center as it is now, but it was NSA at the time. What happens if they move to New York, or move to Washington, or move to some larger city that has the capacity to, when they talk about more of a national agenda in terms of the organization itself, how do you impact have a more national impact, which was, and they had a membership, and so they had people who were elected from different sections of the country, and a board of directors that came from all over the United States. And what was going to prevent that board from saying, we would really be better off in Indianapolis or somewhere else, as opposed to Jonesboro. So, he got pressure from a few people locally. I can take credit for beating him up numerous times about what can we do together that creates a foothold, a root in Jonesboro that will remain. And we started talking about a center, and the ability, the center itself being something that would impact the town year round and have a potential benefit to the organization year round.
Well, talk to me about that a little bit. Talk to me about how storytelling began to shape Jonesboro's future.
Well, I think there was certainly a realization when you have the best weekend of the year economically, that, and it's from people coming in town, that tourism, was a meaningful source of financial stability for the town. And when Jimmy Neal was elected mayor in 1978, he did things that put the town as mayor, and he had a great board of aldermen, Ernest McKinney and Toby and Sam May in particular, that understood the importance of creating the things in town that would not only make it a good place for people to visit, but a good place to live. So it was an understanding that somewhat of a bedroom, that Jonesboro had been turned into more or less a bedroom community, that the idea of being a good bedroom community, a good place to live, and the idea of a good place to visit were very compatible. That the things that you did for one served the other. And if people in town wanted to go to an event, then why wouldn't people who visit you want to go to an event? That was the other thing. We focused on things to do in town that that was mainly for local people, but we tried to do it in such a way that if somebody were coming into town, that they would want to participate in it as well. So I think that it was Jimmy started we built the new town hall, we built the visitor center. That was all done through grants. We had lots of support from TVA, and we used to flood all the time. Downtown, it was terrible, and we worked with TVA on a flood management prevention program that was very impactful. He got funding for a new sewer plant, and we hired staff through CETA. The CETA program was going on at that time, and actually we hired the first visitor center director for $7,500. That's what I made when I came into town.
So
I came in as a community development director. We had a project and got funded through that project at the high rate of $7,500, and so it was just we didn't have a pot to pee in, so to speak, and it was you did creative things to be able to accomplish the goals of the town. We always tried to focus on the downtown being that sense of place, that your downtown belonged to everybody. If you lived in Jonesboro, you had as much right to, you could be out in a subdivision, but you had as much right to be downtown and do things in downtown as anybody else. We operated that way, and sometimes that put us in conflict with merchants sometimes, but all in all, I think we tried to work a balance. We started a number of programs. We hired a recreation director, Kitty Frazier, who we're doing Halloween haunts and happenings and the extravaganza and things like that we started back in '79. That are still going on. Over 40 years later. That with the idea of bringing people together, having a good time, bringing people together, and making it a good place to live. And then if people came in town, Halloween haunts and happenings has been an awesome act. It's awesome.
it is. It's impressive. I've worked there several years as part of the McKinney Center, and it is really something to see more people than live in Jonesboro coming to appreciate and have fun and live there. And so part of what this whole storytelling movement did is it impacted the town at an economic level, but it also impacted the town in looking at livability, the town's livability, making it a place where, yes, you're making all of the numbers crunch right, but you're also making the hearts feel good, and putting that importance on the people who actually live here. So for a lot of years, the Storytelling Festival brought a lot of people from the outside into Jonesboro, and Jonesboro was that welcoming place. At what point did you start to think that Jonesboro needed to tell its own story? Because at this point, people from all over were coming here to tell stories, but Jonesboro wasn't telling its own.
I met a man by the name of Bill Grow. And he worked with the Swamp Gravy program in Colquitt, Georgia. He says, you're going to have to come to Colquitt with me sometime. And I said, okay, let's go. So I went down there. And that's where Swamp Gravy was. And I'm assuming that was the kind of the seed for a lot of the community, all the community performances that are taking place not only there, but all over the country, and especially here in Jonesboro. And they were doing a play that weekend. That was the reason I went, to see the play. And I went, never had seen anything like it before. And there, people on that stage were from Colquitt telling their stories, and Colquitt residents listening and watching. And I said, man, that was awesome. That was important. That they were, look what they were doing, is telling their stories. Now, that wasn't a new idea necessarily in the world of storytelling. However, that solidified it for me. And so Richard Gere and others, including you, ended up in Jonesboro to help collect Jonesboro stories and tell them. And the first thing we did was I Am Home, which was an unbelievable production. It was just wonderful. And Jules wrote that play, and it was, I think it not only brought people together, but it attracted new people to understand what Jonesboro was about.
How hard was it, though, to move from seeing Swamp Gravy yourself and then bringing that idea here? How long did it take to convince people that telling their own stories would be powerful and that they would appreciate it?
I think there's a couple of there were a couple of roadblocks to that. One of them was because there was discussion, a great deal about, that we need to collect stories from the community, and especially the minority, segment of our community, because those were not being written down. And I think one of the things that was different with Community Performance International's approach was the performance of those, because people were collecting stories and writing them down, not so much necessarily in our community, but that was being done. But and we talked about it over and over again about losing people. This person died and we've lost. How much history have we lost because it was just oral. And so we wanted to do that. But the other side of it is that let me back up and just say, when I talk about the roadblocks, one of the aspects of that in terms of doing something local with NSA or the International Storytelling Center, which it became, was the national focus. And how much does ISC participate in a program that is more directed towards the local level? And so that to some extent had been a roadblock in terms of, okay, funding is difficult, so how do you end up funding that kind of an activity on the local? How does ISC justify participating in that? And I think when Jimmy, we had talked a lot about it before he went to Colquitt, but I think Jimmy came back with the idea, this is something that really needs to happen in our community. The other thing that I think happened is the realization through just different kinds of things that have happened in Jonesboro because of storytelling, that that there was a recognition of the importance, the power, going back to the power of storytelling. And I can remember when Al Gore was vice president coming to the festival and telling the story about him being the key person in the Mideast peace negotiations, I think was between Egypt and Israel, that were successful. And he was talking about it and how they couldn't get anywhere. And then, after the formal sessions were over, they'd walk around and then sit down and drink a glass of something or another and start telling their stories. And he said their connectivity occurred as they told stories and developed that sense of commonality that they, regardless of, whether you're Arab or whatever it is, you're, as a parent, you're going through a lot of the same things. And he said that was the foundation that occurred in which the peace negotiations were successful. And when you hear people talk about that kind of thing, and another experience that had an impact on me was Jimmy went off with my wife to the Amazon. And,
it was all legal.
And they flew in and to the Yanomama, and who rarely see anybody white, much less somebody as white as Jimmy. But my daughter Jana told they had a hut where the Yanomama have kind of a communal type thing, but they have these little hut, and I think there was a fire in the center.
We were eating dinner there.
Yeah.
What we were doing, and after dinner,
well, Janet decided to tell a story. So there was one person in the Yanomama village, if I remember, Janet, my wife's telling me this, is that spoke Spanish, and Juan Carlos, who was the guide that they used to go in there. So Jana, as a teenager, told this story, and it was a story about kind of
how mosquitoes buzz in my ear.
Yeah,
or
it's a
something
sort
like
of
that.
inception of mosquitoes, and we will, we're going to curse you, and we're buzzing your ear, and we will suck your blood, and so there's a lot of arm movement and stuff like that in it. And Janet was, even as a kid, was a really good storyteller, and so she told the story in English, and it was translated. Juan Carlos translated into Spanish, and then so that the guy, the Yanomama, one person who knew Spanish, he would translate it into Yanomama, and it went down, and the story was kind of segmented in there, but they all laughed, and you were there, so
yeah.
And it just really impacted me that here you have this connectivity with these people that have come from the Appalachian Mountains into the Amazon, into the remote section of Amazon. They had to fly for hours to get in there, and then go up on a bongo for hours up the river and this kind of stuff. And here's these people connecting with each other through story. It had an impact on me. So part of when we talk to Community Performance International and about doing something in Jonesboro, it was really on the basis where my understanding is, and I know it had an economic impact. In some of the communities that CPI worked in, that you all worked in. But we were interested in it having an impact on us as far as community building and relationship building. And when you think about how you accomplish that goal, it's easy to say, well, we need to do something that it brings our people together. It just sort of occurred to us that this was an opportunity to do something that was real in that area, that potentially could really have an impact. And so we were expecting it, to be something that would bring people together. Again, when you tell somebody's story, you're validating their life. You're talking about things that happen in your community. You're giving people information that they would never get, under a normal circumstance. And so we were motivated, and at the same time we got some funding assistance from Jim Martin, and we were able to use some of that money as an incentive for ISC to partner with us in being able to bring CPI into town and do that performance. And as you know from our relationship is that it had
an important impact.
Thank you very much. It just had a big impact on me. It was more than I expected. The relationships that were formed.
Well, and what happened was that if it sounds like that we couldn't have done this without the town of Jonesboro, I mean, I'm talking about from the very beginning to that play, I Am Home, or even now, you'd be right. We couldn't have done it without the town. That was the partnership that worked and made it happen. And of course, Bob's interest in what we were doing, I mean, he could have just said, oh, that's a nice thing, you go ahead and do it. But no, he became a partner with us. The town of Jonesboro was a partner with us. And so I think that's part of our success. One other thing I'll say is that I think it's important to acknowledge the Jonesboro Storytellers Guild.
Yes.
We haven't talked about that, but 20 plus years ago, David Miller decided there ought to be a storytelling organization in Jonesboro. And he created the Jonesboro Storytellers Guild, he being the founder, plus then other storytellers came in and supported that and became founding members. And they're still going. 20 years later, they're still
every Tuesday.
Going. Yeah, that's right.
Every Tuesday. They even found a way to do it virtually. And so what the festival started began to grow a culture of storytelling in Jonesboro to include the teller in residence.
Right.
And then the community play, which then kicked off, while we're celebrating this magazine, so many other storytelling programs. But Bob, you were in that play. You're a really great performer, and you've performed at the JRT. You performed in the community performance play. Talk to us a little bit about the difference in doing I Am Home.
Well, I can tell you, I have been in I don't know what got into me, but I have been, I would have, as a young person, I would have been paralyzed with the idea of being on stage. But the JRT was doing Smokey Joe's Cafe with a lot of Coasters music, and that was music I grew up on, and I always wanted to be a backup singer, and I thought, well, I can sing some harmony, I had the best time. And I have been in a number of JRT performances, largely the USO shows and things like that, just great music and, a lot of singing, and it's a wonderful family group of people, just awesome people that are involved with the JRT.
And doing a really professional job.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. The theater is we have people, again, who come from outside we've had people who've told us they've moved here because of the JRT, because of the quality of the performances and the people. But I can tell you, I've never teared up in a JRT performance. In I Am Home, it's just like I said, even the practices and stuff, it was just, it's different because you're talking about people in the community, you're talking about stories that are just heartfelt and to some extent unbelievable. Alfred Greenlee, there were a couple stories about him in I Am Home, and what a icon member of the community Alfred was, and he talked about essentially one of them was his one man integration movement 2 years before the schools formally integrated, that he more or less integrated Jonesboro Elementary School, and it was just unbelievable story. Unbelievable, his trip to California, just unbelievable and hilarious. And when some of these people, and Sidney Smallwood's story, just was here's a person that was 95 years old that was in this story collection that you went through, and who had his grandmother told him stories about her as a young child during the Civil War, and having to go out and eat nuts because everybody was stealing their food, and whatever they made, they had to hide to keep somebody, one of the troops or the marauders. It's just an awesome story. And then I Am Home was the effort to collect stories from the Latino community, which was really important, and you were successful in talking to a group of Latinos, and Alma's story of I Am Home was just really impactful. And
why was it important for you to get these stories from the Latino community and the African American community? Because in a lot of towns, a lot of people don't think that far out of their circles. Why was it important to you to do that for this very first play?
I think that there's a number of us in town that understand the importance of relationship building, and that you have to be intentional to to build community. It just doesn't happen with a magic wand kind of thing. It just people are too busy. They're very often working 2 jobs, or husbands and wives at work. That life gets in the way, and so what can community leaders do to bring people together? To get people to interact. If all the interaction takes place on an iPhone, how do you develop relationships that way? I mean, I realize you can go on a dating service and all that, but the reality of it is that human relationship, interaction is what makes us human. So I think we've always felt like it's really important to try to do the kinds of things that support that can make that happen. And you look for ways. People say, well, you need to do more to get the African American community engaged, and we say, yeah, we agree. But so what does that mean? What do you do? And obviously getting more minorities involved in your planning process and things like that. But it's almost, to me, it starts with trust, and it starts with a feeling that you really care, and you care about each other, and that I think when you look at what's going on right now, and in the nation, trust is certainly a big factor. And so if you're going to make things better, you have to have a certain foundation of to build on, I guess. And so I've always felt like that doing things that allow people to know each other, is critical. So when you talk about relationship building, and you talk about the power of story, and that being a vehicle in which you can bring people together, and as you said, I participated as a cast member in I Am Home, and I was dramatically impacted by it. And you know, um, there's people that were in the cast that, when I see them, I hug them. I don't anymore because of the virus, but whenever we get through this virus, I'll hug them again. Because I remember Johnny Rousseau making the comment that he's always felt like, that there's always been good relationships with, amongst different segments of our population, but he said, this is different. This is different.
And would you consider the stories that were in that play easy to perform?
If you're talking about it from, I don't know, I have to ask you where you're headed with that question. If you're talking about from an actor's point of view or something, it was different for me personally, just because most of the time I would be singing or doing something else, and I did do that in I Am Home, but there was just a lot of lines, that so that was different for me, and I wouldn't necessarily say that was easy, but did I enjoy every minute of it? Yes. And I think that was it easy for me to connect with the other people involved in it? Absolutely. It was easy to do that. That the first time that we performed the play, we were in the McKinney Center with no heat, no air conditioning, no
bathrooms,
no wall. The interiors of the walls had been taken out, and it was we had to do it when the weather was allowed us to do it. We did it in April and in October and early November, and there was some challenges with that, but it was a wonderful experience. And
talk about some of the subject matter in the stories that drew you together. You were telling me earlier about Gary, you and Gary Gerhardt.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, obviously, Gary and I knew each other. We didn't know each other. I mean, when you're in the role I'm in a small town, you know a whole bunch of people. But at the same time, when you're in and this is true whether you're at the JRT or doing a community play through the McKinney Center. When you're in a cast, you're part of it. It's an extended family, and
yes.
The challenge of performance in general is significant. Everybody has to, it within itself creates a bonding situation. Again, whether you're on a JRT stage or in the McKinney Center, performance like that just creates a natural bond, because you have, whether you're 5 years old like AJ was, and or 75 like I guess Ed Wolf was probably the oldest one, but there's big age. Everybody was equal, and your importance to the play is equal, and it has a big impact on the young people in the play, because they're viewed, and this would be again true of any, in my opinion, any performance situation, because you're viewed differently. You become just as important as the person over here, regardless of what their age is or whether they're male, female, or whatever. And that has a big impact, especially on young people. And you may remember we had a number of kids in I Am Home, and you could see them change. You could see their self-confidence, their self-esteem. A lot of these were kids that were probably considered at risk, in many different ways. And if you look at what's happened to them, whether it's I Am Home or not, I guess is a different story. But or the community, their participation in the community play. But you could see them change, and their ability to interact with adults and be comfortable, to be able to, get out there and belting out little AJ, 5 years old, was singing solos at the end of the performances, and was just belting it. He would hardly say anything when he first started. So it's when you're watching that happen, and whether you get emotionally tied to it anyway. Just especially some of the stories, as I've said. Gary Gerhardt and I on Alfred Greenlee stuff. We tear up every day. Every day at practice, we'd be standing there watching it. There were a couple times we made ourselves not watch it, but it was. And then at the end of the community plays, one of the things that you all did that I thought was really impactful was remembering people who had passed, and that's another thing that I think is very special about the community plays, and especially the way that CPI approached it, was that just remembering people who had an impact on your life or impact on the town and that kind of thing. And you're holding up a light in the dark at the little candle at the end, and I remember, and there wasn't an audience during that whole time period that wasn't in tears, along with me. That's another part at the end of the show that can I get through this, so and then it's just very impactful, and I guess that's all I can say. When it comes to the difficulty, is the, and again, I'm not sure exactly where you were headed with the question on difficulty. I've done a long soliloquy here on trying to answer that.
Subject matter. Just think of subject matter.
Yeah, the subject matter is different, and it impacts you differently, just like I said, because you know people, and it's not harder to do it, it just has more impact on you.
Because sometimes people find it easier to step into a role, maybe not their parents or grandparents, but their communities, because they might not be able to go out and do Hamlet, but they can do Alfred Greenlee or John Russell or
Right.
Sidney Smallwood because they know them, or they want to really do a good job so they can honor
Right.
them.
And I heard Johnny say that, because he played Alfred Greenlee in the first production of that, and his comment was, I just want to, I know Alfred's going to see this, and I want him to feel like I have, at least tried to do him justice. He was so concerned about that.
How did you feel knowing Sidney Smallwood was going to be in the audience and you're playing him?
I don't remember him being there, thank goodness. I do remember seeing him once, and he was a lot smaller than me, but but at 95, I guess, that's part of it. But his whole story was just, it was amazing. It was just amazing, what he had seen. When you think about it, just like I said, my father was born in 1900 in the Cherokee Strip. Oklahoma wasn't even a state back then, and grew up in a sod house and in the panhandle of Oklahoma, and ended up going to Stanford and Harvard. His dad created a one-room school in Peruna, Oklahoma. This is a community, and what those people went through, and he had to go to high school in Kansas. Wasn't that far, because Harper County is up in, close to Kansas anyway, but he went to school in Kansas, high school in Kansas, and he was telling me my dad told stories too, and I wished I had collected them like I should have, and he was telling me there were 12 people in his graduating class in high school, and he was telling me one of them was the president of Perina and some bank president. He was, these are kids that grew up in the sticks, but education was such a father said that my grandmother put him up in a mercantile building in Kansas where he could go to high school, and he was supposed to work for his room and board, and as far as he was concerned, he had to do that. My grandmother was actually paying the merchant to let my father stay there, but she wanted my father to know the value of having to work for what you get and that kind of thing. But for him to go live in another community just to get an education is what you did back then. It was your way out. And
so you were able to tap into your father, who was probably born around the same time as Sydney or during that era, in order to play Sydney.
Yeah, and just and again, you just think about the what they have experienced in change. It's just there's that generation is there's not really another one like it in terms of what's happened in the world, and very quickly, that kind of thing.
In that era, and a lot of the stories that we collect now as part of the StoryTown program, we go to people who have seen a lot of those changes, although we're at the far edge of them now.
Right.
But after the I Am Home play, and this kind of to round out our discussion today, the I Am Home play actually ended up being the beginning of a new kind of movement using local stories here. And what did you envision for that? What are what would you still like to see, and what's happened since then that you all have seen from where you sit?
I want to answer a question that you asked earlier. We really never got an answer.
Okay.
And that's about the center. How did it come about?
Right.
Yes.
And I'll tell you this, Bill Strickland was a leader in Pittsburgh. And he created a program there that helped young people have a career, or it was started at pottery. He was a potter, and he told that story about how he created those organizations and how they were helping people in Pittsburgh lift themselves up. And he spoke at the Tennessee Arts Commission conference in Johnson City, and I was there. And I'll never forget what he said. He told all about this institution that he had founded, and it was impactful and important because it advanced things in the community that needed to be advanced. And then he said at the end, he said, I challenge each of you to go home and build an institution that confirms and makes real what you know. And I was wrestling with this idea, do we really want to create a facility, a place where storytelling takes place in Jonesboro? Do we really want to do that? And I came out of that meeting, that conference, given his challenge, I said, yes, we definitely want to do that. We want to confirm and make real what we know about the power of storytelling. And we've done that.
Yes, I think so. And then the two of you had this vision about the McKinney Center. And I think kind of the same, not to be the center of like international stories, but you had a vision for what the McKinney Center would do for this community. The McKinney Center that used to be the segregated school in our community. As we round this discussion out, talk to me about the importance of I Am Home starting there and what's evolved there since then.
Well, from my standpoint, I Am Home was the perfect kind of activity to have there, because what we wanted to do was to use the arts as part of that, but to use the arts in general as a way of impacting change. And that was a facility that sort of lent itself into being potentially a really nice art center. At the same time, because of the importance of that school in African American history in Jonesboro, we wanted to recognize that. It was just being used by the school system for storage, and we felt like this is something that needs to be preserved, and we need to preserve the history of it, because you have people like Ernest McKinney, who was early principal there, that were very important people in the leadership and what has happened in Jonesboro. And I was very fortunate. He was on the board when Jimmy Neal was mayor, and I ended up becoming town administrator during that time period. And he was just a kind of a hero to me. And Kevin, his son, who was mayor for 9 years and on the board for 12 years, and Kevin was instrumental in so many different programs. It really, when we talk about ISC, was instrumental in obtaining a very important segment of the funding for that. He went down with Jimmy Neal and myself and Betsy Wington from Community Development Partners. That's a whole other interesting story. I can tell it really fast, but we went down there and we were asking Mike McGuire, who was head of the block grant programming for ECD, Economic Community Development, and Mitchell Parks, who was the representative from the federal agency, the Economic Development Administration, and we were meeting in the office, and we came in there and they were sitting at a desk on either side of a desk in front of us, and we came in and we sort of sat against the wall, and Kevin and Jimmy sort of said, this is what we'd like to have, and we were asking for $500,000 from each one of those agencies, and they were they started talking together. And by the time it ended up, well, if you could do a little more with that, of that, we might be able to go a little bit higher, and because they both had bought into the idea that the Storytelling Center in Jonesboro was really going to be impactful, and we just sat there and listened to them, and by the time they finished the conversation, it was $1.6 million. And we hadn't said anything.
Now, if that's not the power of storytelling, I don't know what is.
I've mentioned that we felt like we got divine help, and I've never experienced anything like that. It was amazing, and but anything I think it's important. While Jimmy's sitting here, to make sure I've done a lot of the talking, but I also at one point in time did a lot of listening, because I've listened to Jimmy, and part of where I ended up was just by I guess realizing through discussions with Jimmy about what was possible and what could happen, and Jimmy's always had the ability to have a vision and to see where things ought to go. And if I've had any ability, part of it has been how to get from A to B. And so we did a lot of things while he was mayor and created a lot of programs and things like that. And we're successful doing it with very little money. We used a lot of creativity in how we packaged things together. But it's been that vision that you sort of become, well, this really needs to happen. So how do you make it happen in Jonesboro? And the center, there wasn't any question from the town standpoint, what made sense for us, because that once you got that building there, we were looking, to keep the festival and keep storytelling as our brand in Jonesboro, and not let it go somewhere else. And so it was unfortunately for their organization, it created a split. They got, that's a whole nother story within itself, in terms of split in the organization. But Jimmy did an awesome job. Building the center was not the easiest thing in the world. That was really a difficult project, and there was all kinds of roadblocks, and it was designed by an architect out of New York that was from New York, and it was very interesting, but it was a difficult process to get that building constructed.
If you're wondering about Bob's role in Jonesboro, I sum it up one way: that this man's fingerprints are all over everything that's good in Jonesboro. And that's not an overstatement, because he nurtured things along. If he didn't create the idea, he helped move the idea forward. And I appreciate that for his help with the storytelling program. And I don't know that we would be doing the play like I Am Home and then everything that came out of that if it hadn't been for the town's support and Bob's support. So it's been a partnership all the way through, and that's the way you get things done.
It is. So as you look 15, 20 years down the road, because you've now got more than 40 behind you with storytelling in Jonesboro, as you look ahead, as AJ and Ron Keel start to become the people who maybe the mayors and the aldermen in Jonesboro, people who have grown up in storytelling, what do you see, or what do you hope to see here locally using our own stories? Because we've seen the power of storytelling from the outside and from the inside. So what do you see 20 years from now, or hope?
Go for it, Bob.
I think the you'd obviously like to see Jonesboro achieve some economic stability, and where life as a merchant downtown or on the 4-lane or wherever it is, isn't a constant struggle. I think some of that will happen. We're going through a tremendous housing boom right now. The number of housing permits that we're issuing within our city limits is really pretty unbelievable. And I think the school, the town has taken a major step in being a facilitator to get a new school in Jonesboro, and I think that was something that was a major detriment to our growth. There were people with young families, and you want to attract young families in town. We're considering other places to live because of that perception, and I will emphasize perception of the quality of education that went on when you have 50, 60-year-old schools and stuff like that. So I think that we're doing things in town. Glenn Rosenoff, who took my place, is a great leader. I think he's perfect person. I'm so pleased that he's has taken my place, and I've become a has-been. But the same time, you feel good that there's positive leadership, somebody who understands the importance of some of the stuff, that not only understands it, but has been complimentary and appreciative of some of the stuff that we've done in town. I do feel like that the importance right now, when you look at again what's the conversations that are going on nationally, there's always a kind of a worry that what you do, locally gets impacted negatively by what goes on, and I hope that doesn't. But it's not a factor in Jonesboro. That what you want is to develop those relationships and understanding and tolerance of each other, that you weather the kinds of interactions that are going on, and that you weather that at least locally. That it doesn't change your community, and my sense is at this point in time is that, and people should be concerned about what happens nationally, but I don't get the sense that it's changed who we are. The virus definitely has changed who we are, and that's very frustrating with the number of activities that we do in town. And I don't know anybody that does the kinds of things that a small town like Jonesboro does. It's very frustrating to everybody involved. There's so many volunteers and everything, to have to get through this, so that you can be normal again. And so my hope is that the work that is hopefully centered somewhat out of the McKinney Center is being impactful. That there's that we do the kinds of things that we've talked about doing, the in-school program, working with young kids, and because there's no question that the use of story, even with young kids, can have a major impact, and we've seen it, we've experienced it. When we did the Big Show program, that was around the time that we were doing I Am Home, and you could just see the impact on those kids. And like I said, the kids in the I Am Home show, that I don't know if you remember that little kind of circle that we did after one of the programs, and it was somebody, I think from the Nicelonger Foundation or somebody was in and just wanted to talk to the kids that were involved in it. Mm-hmm. And she had to be blown away with what they said.
I think it's important for us to consider what we've already done as a foundation. Mm-hmm. That's really all it is a foundation, because there's so much more to do. There's so much more to do in Jonesboro in collecting our stories, celebrating our storytelling, celebrating who we are, and internationally. We have the opportunity of reaching out to touch people around the country and around the world. And when I retired from the International Storytelling Center, the board hired Kiran Singh Sarah, who is an international character in this program and in his work. He is born in England, in London, but his parents were refugees from India and Africa and so forth. So he's got a hell of a story to tell, and he can put the international into the International Storytelling Center, and he's doing that.
And I think that we do, the work that we're doing here has value that's beyond Jonesboro. I think that, with success in programming, we have something to offer other communities, and that would be part of my hope is that we have an opportunity to share what we know and with others, and that strengthens Jonesboro at the same time.
Jimmy, Neil, and Bob, thank you so much. I like those hopes. I think that's a great place to land. Thank you for what you've done for our community, and thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
And thanks, Bob.
I'm sorry I talk so much.